Welcome to Withy Law at the Museum of Cornish Life in Helston. My name's Anna, I'm a local artist and also Withy pot enthusiast, which almost spans 10 years. And I've been working in collaboration with Storylines, which is a community interest company with over 10 years experience in digitally recording stories and also sharing those stories as well. Withy Law is a project which celebrates the endangered craft of withy pot making and also the makers themselves. And I'll tell you a little bit more about withy pots. So withy pots are a traditional form of crab or lobster trap around the southwest, largely made from natural materials, especially willow. It's been around for centuries, but the introduction of modern pots around the 60s and 70s made from plastic and metal very quickly became favoured, which meant that tradition very quickly faded. We've got a very rare opportunity here to see a number of different styles of pots around the southwest, all in one room, and I'll go over them a little bit more in more detail. So here we have a lovely pot made by someone called Aaron Grigg from Mothergissey. And you can see in the bottom of this pot there's lovely twists and turns and there's lots of different colours. He's used a variety of different varieties of willow, and he was taught by a couple of withy pot masters. And he's still exploring and making these today. Next to him we have Nigel Legg from Cadgwith Cove, and he comes from a line of fishermen or withy pot makers. And his pot is very Cornish in style. It has got quite straight sides to it and it's quite tall and narrow. Next to him we have got a pot made by Sue Morgan, and she was taught by the last withy pot maker from Hope Cove. And if you look at the two together, so if we put hers next to Nigel's, you can see hers is much wider and it has a much wider bottom, and that's very common in Devon, so it's a more Devon style pot. And also if we have a look at the bottom and we put that next to Aaron's here, you can see on the bottom of her she's got plaits, and this is traditionally used in Hope Cove and also B Sands in Devon. So they use every part of the willow, whereas Aaron's been taught how to finish his pot with a stick, which you can see here. Okay. We can then move on to a lovely pot down here. Now this isn't a working size pot, this is a smaller version, and it's been made by Stephen Matthews from St Michael's Mount. And you can see here, now he's finished his bottom, which is slightly different also, if you have a look closely. Next to him we have got Geoff Hicks. So we've got two pots by him. He's from the Scilly Isles, and he was taught by a fisherman over in the Scillies, and his style of pot has a lovely funnel he's created here, which is a way of attaching his bait. They all have different ways that they do this. And the reason why we have two pots here, so we've got one example here. This one hasn't been fished, this hasn't been used yet, whereas this one has. So this one has spent 6 months in the waters in the Scillies, and you can see here how it's weathered. And it's just to show you how fragile the material is. Although it lasts the full season, it does what it's been made to do, it eventually does break down back to the earth, and I think that's something that's very special about them. And Geoff from the Scillies is a working fisherman. He does this for a living. This is what his living is, and he fishes by sail and oar as well. It's all very eco-friendly and 100% plastic free. If we move on over here, we have some willow on display. Now this willow here has been dried, and traditionally the withy pot makers would make their withy pots in the winter time, and that was when the willow is at its best to be cut and woven, so it would be fresh, it would be green. But some withy pot makers more recently have been using dry willow, so this has been cut in the winter time, but then it's been stored and dried. And then it's soaked and woven, and a lot of basket makers use these as well. But if I move on over here, you can see an example of a withy pot being made using freshly cut green willow. This has its bark still on there. Now Tom Chambers has made this, he's from Porthleven, and he's popped it on this stand here. So this is called a pot stand, and the majority of withy pot makers I've come across use these. But there are some that only use this top part, so they'll sit down with that bit on their lap and they'll make the pots, which to me looks quite uncomfortable. So I can understand why they decided to introduce a stand to these. Now down here, Tom has given us an example of what he does when he's finishing his pots on the bottom. So he's taken off the pot or the top half from the stand and he's popping it on the floor. And here you can see tamarisk. So this is another type of material or a natural material that's been used. This is a Porthleven style pot, and it's a Mediterranean plant, so it isn't a native plant. But the reason why they use this is because it's very, very, very strong, and it's really good as it acts a bit like a bumper. So this bit down here is called a chim, this bit that runs around the outer edge. And it's really good because it lasts a bit longer than the willow itself, so that's why that's used. In the cabinet over here, I will show you an example of one of Tom Chambers' finished withy pots. There's some lovely photos up there of him next to his father. He was taught by his father, George Chambers, that you can see in the cabinet there too, along with George Chambers' pot stand. Next to him on the floor we have got a pot made by Richard Eade from, he was taught in Penberth, and he says he does a Porthleven style pot. But inside his pot you might notice there's some cement, and the cement's used to weigh down the withy pot. And this is a fairly new idea that someone showed him, and he thought it was brilliant because traditionally, you'd use stones, which you can find inside Tom Chambers' pot, and the stones have been tied with some rope to weigh down the withy pot itself. So there's two examples there of different ways that the withy pots have been weighed down. Here we have, again, it's not a working size pot, but this is a pot made by Barry Mundy from Mullion Cove. And inside his pot, we have got something called, some people call a skiver, he calls a predon in Cornish, or a preen, and that's used for attaching bait. So there's another example of attaching bait inside the pot. And next to him we have got a pot made by Robert George from Penberth Cove. So he was taught in Penberth Cove like Richard Eade, but the styles are just slightly different, and that's something that every pot has its own little character, and obviously it depends on where it is made, because it's made for the terrain that it has to withstand as well, and also the materials that they have available too. On the screen we also have a set of 4 films you can watch. So we have 3 withy pot makers, and then one about myself and my personal connection to the craft, and how it inspires my work. You can find out more about them on the Storylines website, which is storylines.org.uk. We also have a listening station where you can listen to a set of oral histories which have been recorded throughout 2024 with withy pot makers, and you just place a card inside and you can listen, and you can sit in this lovely chair which has been made by someone called Richard Hooper, inspired again by withy pots. We also have around the room some pages of a story I've written. So this is my storybook. It's called Withy Pots and Salix Piskies, and it's inspired by stories that I've been listening to since late 2016. And the story is inspired by the connection that the withy pot makers have with nature, particularly the willow plant and the cycle of that plant. And each page has been illustrated using different mediums. Firstly, metal, as metal is one of the mediums I've been using for many years. And what I've done is I've used metal plates, and I've drawn some illustrations, and I found a new technique that I hadn't tried before called saltwater etching. And what I've done is I've etched, using saltwater etching, the illustration onto a copper sheet. And I've got some examples of some plates here. And these have been then used as to intaglio print. So that's another traditional technique onto paper. And then what I've done is I've repurposed these copper plates, which you can see here, and I've made them into jewellery. So Withy pot makers often repurposed lots of different materials. I found that really inspiring, and I felt like that was something I really wanted to do myself. So they were then photographed and formed illustrations against the text. So each page of the story has been created to create a sort of thread to learn more. So what Sarah's done from Storylines is she's used the text from my book, and she's created or used some of the oral history, or transcribed the text from the oral histories that relate to that text. And we've used that in various ways. So you can see some lovely examples here on the wall. My children are also in the story. Their great-great-grandfather was from Penberth. He was a Withy pot maker, and they're little Salix piskies within the story itself. And they're made up of the willow leaf skeleton, the blackmore leaf, which is a particular variety, or a favoured variety that's been used. I will show you also an illustration here. So I delved a little deeper into one of the pages, which was about the varying styles across the southwest, and I've started documenting and recording those in black and white illustrations. And these have also derived from a set of photographs, which I'll show you here. So we have a set of photographs, and I've been collecting these since 2020, and these are during recordings with Cornwall College, and more recently Storylines. You can find these on my website, which is www.annapopedesign.co.uk, and you'll see there tops of the pots, the sides, and also the bottoms, along with lovely portrait photographs of the makers as well. And this is a lovely, fun, interactive display. We have to try and match the pot. And alongside this, I've also been documenting the terminology, as well as the different styles of black and white illustration, which you can find here. And then lastly, I'd love to show you inside the cabinets, we have some tools. So we have tools, we have books, we have hats, we have all sorts of interesting things that the Withy pot makers have kindly lent us to show you, including a lovely hat by the late George Chambers. So we are excited to tell you that along with this lovely exhibition we've had here, we will also be showing Withy Law at Crescent from November to February, and then in Padstow Lobster Hatchery from February to April. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to a little bit more about Withy Law, and hopefully you can pop along to one of those later in the year and next year. Thank you again. Bye.